Abby has been my best friend since we've been kids. We grew up living a few houses away from each other. Since the moment we met, we became inseparable. I've known that I loved her for a long time. Only recently I realized that I was in love with her. At first, I thought it would be better to keep that fact a secret. Soon, it became clear this would come out one way or another. I was never good at hiding anything from her. I decided that I would tell her on my own terms. After I told her everything would be different, she would either feel weird about our friendship, or by some miracle, she would feel the same way about me. We lived near a small forested area with a large pond in the middle. There was a dock that we often went to, just to hang out, to sometimes skip class if we felt like it. In a month, we'd be graduating high school, and I felt like it was a good time to come clean on my feelings. Since we both loved the dock, I figured that might be the best place to break the news. She gladly agreed to hang out, and we started towards the park. Just before we went onto the trail, we saw a man that was somewhat of a local fixture. He walked around and cleaned up the garbage from the side of the road. He took in the bottles and cans for money, but because he was already picking up trash, he cleaned up whatever he came across. Abby was a little frightened of him. He was bone thin and did some prison time. Normally dressed in well-worn, but mostly clean clothing. He didn't seem like the type of person we should talk with. I had no issue with him, and kinda respected him for cleaning up the area. He was just walking out of the woods, with a nearly full clear trash bag. It took me a few seconds to remember his name. "What are you girls up to? Taking a hike?" He asked when he was close enough to speak with us. I could never place his accent. It was faint. Once I noticed it, I was super bothered trying to figure it out. "Just going on a short walk, Mr. Kendall." The high school students knew him, because he would do everyone a favor and clean up after any big parties. Despite his appearance, he was an alright guy. I wondered what mistake in his past got him in prison in the first place. "Be careful, alright? The woods feel bad today. Plus, there is those, what are they? Yippin' things." "Coyotes?" "Yeah, heard some. Come back out soon." Abby kept her distance when we spoke, and I don't think he blamed her. A lot of people didn't get close to him. At least he was a good enough person to worry about us. In all my years of living in the area, I've never seen a coyote, but I knew they lived in the woods. "We'll be careful, thank you, Mr. Kendall." "Yes, thank you," Abby added. She didn't look as weary as before. I think she was so freaked out by him, because they never actually talked to each other before. He gave us a worried look, but continued on down the road, looking for more cans. We should have listened to him and stayed out of the woods. As we walked, we spoke about whatever current drama within our friend group, and our future plans. We took this path 100 times before, so we didn't even pay attention to where we were headed. "Do you think we'll have enough money to move in with each other after school?" Abby asked me when we brought up future goals. I wanted nothing more than to live with her, but I didn't think she'd want anything to do with me after that night. "I hope so. I've been saving whatever I've gotten from my job," I told her. I only had a part-time job and delivered newspapers before school. It wasn't much, but at least it was something to start with. Abby opened her mouth to speak when she heard a noise. Her hand flew into mine, as we both looked around trying to find the source. It was a thumping sound, one that echoed through the trees. We stopped dead on the trail. wondering what the hell made a noise like that. "Do you think a tree fell over?" I offered. "No, I've heard trees falling. It's more cracking than a big thud," Abby said, trying to keep her voice even. Another thud came and we both jumped. After a few more coming ever closer, I decided my confession could wait. Whatever that noise was, we didn't want to find out. "Time to go?" I asked her. She nodded her head and confirmed it. Still, with her hand in my own, I turned to walk back the way we came, and thought I went blind for a few seconds. Abby let out a yelp of surprise when we stood in the dark. It was later in the day, but it was impossible for the sun to set so quickly. As my eyes adjusted, I could see a full moon high above it, shining through the trees. "What in the world?" I asked, voice low. Abby already had her phone out, trying to get some help or check the time. It refused to work at all. Might as well have been a brick. It was that useful. Mine was acting up as well. As scary as the sun suddenly going away was, we were still in a good spot. I knew where on the trail we stopped. If we just kept walking, we would be out of the woods in a few short minutes. "This doesn't make any sense," she said, looking around the dark trail. I took her hand again to help her start moving. We could not afford to stop. I heard another thumping noise and it motivated us to move faster. No matter how far we walked, it felt like we were going nowhere. I was starting to get very scared, but needed to keep it together for her. Those thumping noises kept echoing around us. As more time passed, as we didn't get to the end of the trail, I found I could gather up my courage enough to turn my head towards the noise. What I saw would remain in my nightmares forever. At first, I thought someone was hanging in the tree. I saw a pale figure dressed in white, their feet dangling. The thumping sound was the wind blowing the body against the tree. I felt sick, and the sight made me freeze in my tracks. As the sky cleared of clouds, and more moonlight came through the leaves, I could see more figures in the branches bumping against the bark. Abby let out a choked sob when she saw what I was staring at. But something was wrong. I didn't see any rope that the bodies were being hung with, and I didn't see any heads. If there was no rope, then how were the bodies in the air like that? My skin crawled and I wanted to get the hell out of there. I tugged on Abby's hand for us to get moving again. I don't know if it was because we moved, or if it was random, but the bodies started to turn towards us. I didn't want to stick around. I was nearly dragging Abby as we bolted down the path. As we ran, I heard those bodies following us. I was brave enough to look over my shoulder once, to see them just floating in the treetops. They bounced off anything in their way. Limp and mostly silent, I heard their clothing rustling through the air as they floated around. Abby was trying her best not to cry. I was in such a state of shock I nearly gave in to sobs myself. We'd just been walking on a safe trail, and now, for whatever reason, a dozen floating headless bodies were coming after us. I didn't understand this. Nothing made sense. I just wanted to tell my best friend how I felt about her. I should have said it sooner, so at least I wouldn't bring regrets to my grave. One of those bodies swooped down. Its feet brushed against my hair. Abby let out a yelp from seeing it. I thought it was a miracle when I saw someone on the trail down the way from us. We both pushed through ragged breaths from running so hard to catch up to him, only to regret our choice very shortly after. He was tall and I assumed he wore a tan jacket before we got closer. The air shifted and brought a rotting, yet flowery scent. The figure turned towards us, and we both let out a scream. It was so thin we could see every bone in its body, a sheet tied around its waist, and flowers around its neck, but no head. That tall figure looked and smelled like a headless, rotting corpse. We both skidded to a stop to stay away from this new thing, the floating bodies getting closer. I held on to Abby and helped her duck, as more of them swooped down and narrowly missed us. The corpse walked towards us with long strides. In one hand, it held a pole with a hook at the end. Using the pole, it swatted some of the bodies away. If I wasn't so scared, I would have laughed at the image. We started to walk away as the new creature came towards us. Abby was snatched from my arms as the monster hooked her waist with the pole and dragged her forward. I quickly grabbed her again to try and get her back to me, but this thing was far too strong. We cried, begging it to spare us, and I begged it to at least spare Abby. All the while, I heard more thumping sounds above us. When it unhooked the pole to grab her arm, I took that as my chance to swoop in and ran away with her. I felt the hook catch the back of my shirt as it just ripped, letting us go free. Now, we had a new monster following us, and with no plan, we ran. The forest changing around us to a place we didn't recognize. I thought I saw the sky getting lighter, and my heart leapt into my chest, hoping we found a way out. Suddenly, the woods shifted, and I found us right in front of a drop-off. We stopped in time, sweat dripping from our faces and lungs burning. There was a hill in front of us that was not part of the area. The woods were far too small for a hill like this, and for how high up we were, we should be able to see some houses. Instead, just dark woods as far as we could see. "Do you?" Abby said, but too out of breath to keep speaking. I knew what she meant. She wanted to see if we got away. I turned to answer her question, and saw that the corpse easily followed us. Being so distracted, we didn't hear or see it. Extending the pole out in front of him, he hooked my ankle to pull my foot from under me. I fell back and off the hill, Abby still holding on to me. We both tumbled down, expecting to die from the fall. I was scared, but also angry that it was such a lame way to go. I closed my eyes and held on to my friend as tight as I could. The fall felt like years, but the impact wasn't all that painful. It was as if we simply tripped. Sitting up and utterly confused, we found ourselves back on the trail. The sun orange around us. I heard voices and was frightened at first. Then, I saw that a pair of officers were coming towards us. They quickly looked us over for any injuries, and we found out that we had only been missing for under an hour. They walked us out of the woods, and I spotted Mr. Kendall waiting. He looked relieved that we were safe. He said he heard screaming, and since you two hadn't come out yet, he called us. One of the officers explained. We gave them a weak excuse of seeing a coyote and getting scared. We screamed and ran off into the woods. After all, who would believe what we really saw? We thanked Mr. Kendall for calling for help. He gave us a knowing look, but didn't outright say that he knew what was in those woods. When we were finally able to walk home, Abby was still holding onto my arm, shaken up over the whole thing. When we go on our first date, it should be something really normal after this, she said in a tired voice. Yeah, Wait, you knew? I almost felt betrayed, but any negative feelings went away as she smiled up at me. You were always bad at hiding things from me.